Thanks for tuning in at Brackeys.
Hello everyone and welcome to video number 19 in the How to Make a 2D Platformer course. In today's video, we're going to take a look at creating an enemy health bar. But we're going to do this by creating a fairly generic status indicator script. So we're going to be able to expand onto this later, such as adding an ammo display, something maybe if we want a kind of mana, all that stuff. And also we'll hopefully be able to use this both for the enemy and for the player. So that should be pretty cool. But before we get into it, I just quickly want to mention that if you have any questions, go to forum.brackeys.com. And also, and not many people know this, Brackeys actually has an apparel store. So if you want some cool Brackeys merch or some I'm a developer t-shirts, there's also a Write Code one. They come in many different shapes and forms and colors. So if you think that's cool, check it out. And also a lot of people ask me how they can kind of help support Brackeys. Well, one way is of course donating. That's completely optional, but links are in the description. Or if you want to get something cool out of it, you can always buy a t-shirt. That's a percentage of what it costs also goes to me. So that definitely helps out a lot. Cool, so now that I've self-promoted a little bit, let's go ahead and open up Unity. And as you can see, I'm currently using the dark skin, but of course, all the features that we're going to be using are available in Unity Personal Edition. So yeah, the first thing that we want to do here is just set up the UI for what we're going to be making. So we kind of have, we have a reference so we can see what's changing. And to do this, I'll go into the scene view and select our alien spaceship. And on him, I'll right click, go under UI and create an image. And you can see that it spawns in this huge canvas if you just select it and hit F. So what we'll do with this is first off, we'll call this status indicator. And we'll drag this under the alien spaceship. Then we'll change the render mode to world space so that we can parent it to our alien spaceship and have it follow around. And next up, we are going to bump the width. Let's just reset the transform actually down here. And let's make it a width of 100 and a height of 100, which should be default. And next up, we can change the scale. So basically, instead of just making it really, really small by just dragging it on this box and setting the width and height really low, we want to change the scale, because else we are not going to have any pixels to work with inside of this area. We want 100 by 100 pixels to work with at least when starting out, and then simply scaling those pixels down. So basically we want to set this to like 0.1, 0.1, 0.1. And then we can just change to the scaling tool by hitting R and simply just scale it down even further. Something like that looks pretty good. And now we can drag it up and maybe make it a bit smaller here. And for that, I'm not going to be using the scale. I only use the scale uniformly. So that's very important. Okay, so next up we can take our image and simply snap it to scale with our entire canvas. And basically I just want to bring this down to make it look a bit more like a health bar. And then we want it to basically snap to the bottom and scale with its width. And in order to do that, we'll simply click this right here. Also, because we want this to scale in kind of from the right here to the left, we'll have to change our pivot point. So you can either drag that over here in the middle to the left, or you can simply change the values for it here. So you can see the only thing that we need to change is simply set the X here to 0 and it will snap to the left center. Cool, so now you can see that if we change, oops, that must be an error. If we change the canvas here, it scales with it. And it doesn't scale on the y-axis. Cool. So next up, I think is let's do some text also that displays our health. So let's make this bar here green. And then later, maybe we can make it change color depending on how much health we have left. That's definitely something that I want to do, but I think right now we should just kind of get it to where we want it, and then later we can do that kind of tweaking. That's also a fun challenge if you look up Unity gradients. So, and we'll just rename this to health bar. And next up, we'll make a text object. And you'll notice that this starts out pretty big. And with this, we just want to place it, let's say, at the top here. And so that it goes from the left to the right. And we want to scale with that, but we want it to be kind of parented to the top here. So therefore you can select this one. Cool. And whoops. What we can do now is simply take the whole status indicator and bring it down a bit. We can also change the font size to something like 10. And then we'll change the text here to something like 100 out of 100 HP. We'll change the color to completely white, and we'll make this a bold text object. Next up, we'll simply drag this down to something like that, and then we can again bump this down. Something like that looks fairly decent. And you will notice right now that our health bar is rendering very almost pixel perfect. I mean, it's very sharp on the edges. But the text object is currently almost blurred out. It's very clear that this is not very high resolution. But the reason for this, and I'll show you, we'll just call this health text. The reason for this is if we go into the status indicator, we currently have a very low dynamic pixels per unit. So PPU, pixels per unit, is what kind of helps us define the resolution per unit that this object should be drawn with. So the higher the number you put here, the more calculations the computer will have to do. But at the same time, the higher resolution we will get. And you don't need to change this much in order for it to get drastically better. You can see just from 1 to 2, it gets a whole lot better. And for this, I'll put mine all the way up to 5. That might be a bit too much, but I think that that's a pretty fine number to begin with. So you can see that that's completely crisp. And this might not look extremely nice on the recording because of how it kind of calculates pixels, but I assure you that it looks pretty fine when I play the game here. So that's something you can mess around with. Cool, so next up I maybe just want to bring this in just a tad. So if you want to scale from the center, you can simply hold down Alt while dragging and it'll do that. So I think we'll put this at 75 and 17. So if you want my exact numbers, you can get them there. Cool. So now that we kind of have that in place, I think it's time to go ahead and actually make this update via script. So let's make a status indicator script. And this is of course going to be of type C#. So status indicator. Let's double click this and it will open up in Visual Studio. And again, if you want a tutorial on setting up Visual Studio to work nicely with Unity, I just recently made one of those. So we are going to exclude using system.collections, but instead we're going to use Unity Engine.ui. Cool. And we're going to set up some references here. The first reference, I want to keep these values private because I don't want them to be accessed by other scripts, but at the same time I want them to show up in the Unity editor so we can drag them in. So a cool way to do this is simply write out private and then the type, and that's going to be a type rect transform, so we can change the scale on that. And we are just going to call this health bar rect or something like that. I think that's going to be fine. And next up, a private text object called health text. And if we want these to actually show up, we can use this attribute here called serialize field. So that will make them show up in the editor even though they are private. And that's of course the exact same as writing this. I just like to be explicit with that kind of stuff. Cool. And next up, we'll maybe do some checking if we have these components. I think we are. So inside of an awake statement here, let's actually just make this a start statement. For now at least, we'll say if health bar rect is equal to null, we'll complain a bit. So debug.log error, and we'll say no health bar object referenced. And this is from the status indicator. And we'll just copy this. And we'll do health text. Status indicator, no health text object referenced. Cool. So I don't want to return or anything. I just want to easily be able to see this in the console. Awesome. So next up, we'll make a public void. And this is going to set the health. So assuming that we have these components, I think we're just going to assume that every status indicator has a health. But if not, we can just simply have stuff like mana or ammo points again that doesn't necessarily need to be applied. But we'll get into that. So public void set health. And what we want to do in here is basically we want to pass in a few things. So the first one is the int max health. Or let's do the current one first. So current and then int max. And notice that I'm doing these underscores. That's just to be very explicit about this being a private variable that is only accessible within the scope of this method. So I do that a lot when kind of showing that this is passed in as an argument or created inside the method. That's up to you if you want to take on that naming convention. It's fairly standard in C#. Cool. So once we have that, in here we can simply calculate out. And this is going to be a floating point value. We're going to calculate out kind of the percentage of our maximum health that we currently have. And actually, let's make that a number between 0 and 1. So we'll just call this one value. And again, because I'm creating this inside the method and it won't be accessible out here, I'm going to do the underscore. And we're going to set this equal to the current health divided by max health. And we'll make sure that we cast this into a float. Awesome. Next up, what we can do is we can simply set our health bar rect dot local scale. I think, yes, local scale equal to a new vector 3. And in here, we're going to do value. That's going to be our x. So that's going to go between 0 and 1, depending on how much health we have. And then 1 and 1. We just want the other parts to remain the same. We could also make sure that if we've made some changes to the other parts, if we kind of scale them. I think right now we're just going to do 1f, but we could also do something like this. Actually, we're just going to do this for order's sake. Cool. So that's going to change the scale of our health bar. And next up, we just want to change our text. So we're just going to do health text.text equals, and then we'll put in the current amount of health. Then we'll do a plus sign because we want to do the slash there. And then the maximum health. And then we'll do space HP. Something like that. However you want to format this is completely up to you. I know that this is currently hard-coded and there are better ways to do that, but I think this will be more than fine for now. I mean, it's the game is not that complicated as of yet. If it ain't broken, we're not going to fix it. Cool. So let's save that. And this script should actually be error-free. And it should actually be working, but currently we don't have anything calling this setHealth method. And that's what we're going to implement into our enemy script. So first up, let's just make sure to set up our health bar and our health text. At a later point, if you wanted to do the changing of colors on the health bar, what we would do is in here simply grab the image component, then change the color of that image component and set it equal to a gradient that you've created up here, public gradient, where the value you use to lerp through that gradient would be underscore value. So if that makes any sense, awesome. If not, we're probably going to get into it. I don't want to promise it because we have so much to do. But I know that Unity cookie, I believe they're called, no, that's wrong. It wasn't Unity cookie. It's Cooking with Unity. They have a tutorial on doing that. Awesome. So let's move on. So let's dig into our alien spaceship and open up the enemy script here. And we're going to expand just a bit on this because this is a very simple way to do a custom class. But I kind of want to set this up in a bit more usable fashion. So basically, currently we only have a health. We don't have any value storing the maximum amount of health that we're allowed to have. So if we wanted to do some healing, that wouldn't be possible. And again, if we want to show our maximum health, that's not currently possible either. So let's change this around a bit. So inside of our enemy stats, we'll do a public int called max health. And we won't default this to anything just yet. Then we'll also do another public int. And this is going to be called current health. Actually, I want to change this max health to be non-capital. And the same with this current health. But I also want to create a private int called underscore current health. So I don't quite think we've gone over getters and setters yet. So getters and setters are basically a way to control how we go about changing the value of a variable. And that's why we have a get part, which is what we do when we want to retrieve what is inside the variable. And we have a set part, which basically allows us to change how we change a value of a variable. So basically inside of this current health, what we do is instead of just making a semicolon, we open up some brackets on a new line. Cool. And in here, we'll basically be changing this private integer. That's going to store the number that we want to store. But we're going to be accessing it through this public getSet variable. So first off, let's create a getter. So whenever we want to get something, get our current health from this private variable, we'll simply return that variable. So get just returns our current health. But when we want to set it, we don't just want to set the variable. We want to make sure that it is between 0 and our max health. This will make sure that we don't ever get a negative health amount and that we never get healed or whatever we want to do above our max health amount. So that's a super cool thing that we can do very easily by just using the set keyword. So if we just wanted to set our current health equal to whatever value that we wanted, we would simply say that underscore current health equals value. That's the standard getter and setter, and you might have seen it before if you've looked at some longer C# scripts. But what we want to do is basically we want to clamp this between two values. So we are going to do math.clamp, and we're going to say the value that we want to clamp is called value. That's kind of the keyword that we use for the value that this variable is set equal to. And then the minimum is going to be 0, and the maximum is going to be our max health. So this will ensure that every time we change our current health, it's gonna be clamped between 0 and our maximum amount of health. And for some reason I've made an error here of some kind, so what's going on? I'll just save this out in a second, and we'll see what's wrong. But first we'll just change our damage enemy here. This is going to be changed to current health. So whenever we want to access it or change it, we use the none_ version, because that's kind of our accessor, kind of what we have to go through in order to get to our actual current health. So if that's very confusing to you at the moment, I get it. Just know that this is a very handy way to control values. So let's just try and save this and see what's going on here. Cannot implicitly convert type float to int. That's because we put an F here and the rest is integer values. So we'll just do that, and I think that should be fine. Yeah, we were using the float version of math.clamp. We wanted to use the integer version. And cool. So now that we have that in place, another thing I want to do with the enemy stats is I want to make sure that we set our current health equal to our max health at the very beginning of our game. So first off, let's set a default amount for our max health. And let's simply do that up here for now. We could make a class constructor, but let's just put it there. And then down here, I want to make a method that will allow us to initialize such variables. So right now it's simply our current health. Later it might be the mana and current mana and all that stuff. But basically I just want to have a public void here called init that will take care of all those kinds of variables that will have to be set up at compile time or the beginning of runtime. So inside of this init method, we're simply going to set our current health equal to our max health. And it's that easy. If we wanted to have an opponent begin or start its life with only a percentage of our max health, we could create another public method here called, or another public variable of type float, and we'll just call this maybe start percent health, something like that, and we're going to default it to 1f, and then you can simply say that the current health equals max health times start percent health, or something like that. So you can chop off some of an opponent's health inside the Unity editor. But for now we're just going to go with this, and then we're going to go into a start method. And in here we are simply going to set say that our stats dot we're simply going to say stats.init. And also up here, instead of just creating that there, I think we are going to say in our start method that we want stats to be equal to a new enemy stats. That way we have complete control over when it will create that object. Now I'm starting to doubt this. Actually, let's do this. Let's let the editor take care of that. Cool. So, but we definitely want to init it inside of the start method. There are so many ways to do this kind of stuff because we are really just creating a lot of code to not get very much done. But it's important once you get a bit of a bigger game, which this is becoming, that you do this stuff, because it will really help limit errors later. And also, if you're working multiple people on a project, this is a necessity because it really gives a lot more freedom to the level editors. Awesome. So now that we are initting the stats, we simply want a reference to our status indicator. So we're going to make a public status indicator. And again, I don't want this to be public. I actually want it to be private, but I want it to be accessible in Unity. So we're going to make a private serialized field. and it's going to be of type status indicator. And I'm just going to do status indicator for the name here with a non-capital S. And then in the start method, we'll set status indicator, or check if status indicator is equal to null. And here we could say that we want to print out an error if it's equal to null, or we could just make this an optional part. And I think we're going to do that. So not every enemy or whatever is going to need a status indicator, but it can have one if it wants. So therefore we're going to make a header up here. And headers are a property drawer, an attribute that will allow you to just type in something inside of the Unity editor. Or inside of the inspector. And what we're going to type here is just optional. Just mark that as an optional feature. So if we go down here, you will be able to see that once this refreshes, that we have a status indicator and that it currently says optional right above. So that's a pretty nice way of structuring your inspectors. So if static indicator is not equal to null, we want to set health, and we want to say current health. Oops, we want to set stats dot current health, comma stats dot max health. Awesome. And next up, under the enemy here, down below here, after we kill it, if we don't need to handle its health if we just kill it right away, but we will if it doesn't die. So down here, we are simply going to set the health the same way. So we're just going to check if it's equal to null, and if it isn't, we're going to set the health there. Awesome. I think that was pretty much everything we needed to do. So now we can simply go into our stats here. And for some reason that's defaulting to 0, so there we go, now it's defaulting to 100. And we'll simply drag in the status indicator, whoops. And now we can hit play. And when we shoot this guy, you can see his health going down until he dies. So that was a lot of code for not much functionality, but this is going to be so easy to build on top of. Later we can add a bunch of different functionality, and I just wanted to kind of give you this cool playground where you can add a bunch of different cool mechanics for your game, because it's going to be as simple as just adding it into the enemy stats class, and then just changing it with a method inside of the enemy, and just making sure that you pass that on to a method on the status indicator. So it's fairly simple to get gameplay mechanics and kind of this database of values and the graphics to work together. Awesome. So that was basically everything for this video. I'm just gonna play around with this for a bit, just show you how this is working, and I guess I'll see you in the next video.